Hi, everybody. Welcome to Take Your Best Shot, Trail Photography for Kids with Kathy Oakes. My name is Annie Nelson, and I work for the Superior Hiking Trail Association. We are so excited you've joined us today for this class on how to take great photos on the Superior Hiking Trail. Kathy will teach us many wonderful things, from how to take really cool photos of your friends next to a waterfall to cute photos of the teeny tiny mushrooms that grow along the trail. Before we begin, the Superior Hiking Trail is located on the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe people. Did you know there is a huge group of people who take care of the trail? I'm just one of the people who work every day to make it an awesome trail for adventure. We have hundreds of volunteers who help build bridges, use chainsaws to cut through trees that might be blocking the trail, take care of campsites, and much more. To make the trail an amazing place for adventure and photography, we depend on members donating the funds we need to buy supplies and coordinate volunteers. If you would like to help take care of the trail, please visit superiorhiking.org. During tonight's webinar or this morning's webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask anytime using the Q&A question box, and we'll answer your questions as we go along. We'll also have time at the end of the presentation for more questions. We are recording this webinar and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. The recording will also feature captions for those who may be hard of hearing. And now I'm really pleased to introduce Kathy Oakes. Kathy is a photographer and author who is passionate about travel and education. She teaches photography and social skills classes at Planet Homeschool, a secular learning co-op in Minneapolis. Kathy has lived on 4 continents, backpacked through Southeast Asia in her 20s, and has been a portrait and wedding photographer. She and her husband now make annual hiking trips on the Superior Hiking Trail as part of homeschooling their 3 sons. She loves passing along her skills to others. So without further ado, I am pleased to welcome Kathy.
Hello, and thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about this. Lots of fun. I'm going to go ahead and pop into my screen share to do my lecture. But please feel free to type in any questions, and then Annie will pipe up with the questions. She'll ask me the questions, and then I can answer them. So without further ado, here we go on Take Your Best Shot. Photography for kids and really for anybody. So how to stay safe, have fun, protect the Superior Hiking Trail, and take some great photos along the way. I wanted to point out that you'll see that there's a little title on this photo, Southern Terminus by Michael, age 17. All the photos that have attributions like that are done by my students. Anything that isn't is generally by me. Although this one here was done by my mom, who comes and hikes with us actually every year on the trail as well. But she didn't want to be attributed, so I left her name off. So we're going to cover several things besides just photography to help make your hiking experience great. We're going to talk about safety, yours, your camera equipment, and the space you're in. Composition, what makes an interesting picture, and how to frame it. And then some extra tips on ways to make what you're photographing really pop out and make a great photo. So, talking first about staying safe. So you want to plan ahead. This is really important. And bring a map or a guidebook. Lots of people just assume that their phones are going to be good enough. And there's lots of places out there. There is no cell service. You want to have an idea of how long the trail is going to be, where it's going to be, what to expect on it. Where are you going? How long are you going to be out there? What are you going to need to bring, right? Plan ahead. I asked my kids, because they're the ones who actually are really, especially Michael here, he's my oldest. He was the one who got us started hiking the trail. I said, what would you recommend that I add to this? And he said, check the weather. He he and his brother, we dropped him off to do a couple of hours. And it was just totally pouring down rain when we came and picked them up. So we brought them hot chocolate and towels in the car. But he was very surprised by the rain. So check the weather before you go. Make sure you got good shoes or boots and the right clothes for the weather. So bring those raincoats, or, sun, like long sleeve shirts to keep from getting sunburned. Add sunscreen and insect repellent. Bring plenty of food and water. Also, stay on the trail. This helps both you so you don't get lost and keeping your surroundings safe as well. Stay with your group. And if you can't find them, return to where you last saw them. That's where they're going to be looking for you, not, you know, off in the woods. Respect the wildlife. Don't approach or feed any animals. And if it's other people's dogs and not wildlife, ask first. You never know. Don't touch unknown plants. There is poison ivy out there. So keep yourselves safe. Then we're going to talk about protecting the Superior Trail. You want to leave a place as good as you found it or better. So pack out all trash and pet waste. Leave what you find in nature. Don't move or remove things, build structures or rock cairns. And I kind of wanted to address that because rock cairns are such a huge thing and people are like, oh, but it's, no big deal to just build a rock cairn. Well, it really is actually. First of all, lots of insects, which are important to our ecosystem, actually live under rocks and including rocks in the rivers. And another thing is, one rock cairn, you might look at it and you're like, oh, that's really nice. But the last time I went to Gooseberry Falls, there were 15 cairns in the river there. I'm thinking, this is not what I come here to look at. I want to see nature, not 15 rock cairns. I want to say leave off the geotags in your locations if you do social media posts. So you want to keep your favorite spots from being overrun. That's happening more and more these days. And, we just try to encourage you not to contribute to that. And for more ideas along these lines, you want to check out the Leave No Trace 7 Principles at lnt.org. Any questions?
I think one common question, Kathy, is where would you find guide and maps for the Superior Hiking Trail?
Well, we like to go to the Superior Hiking Trail Center, which is in Two Harbors, but there are actually a number of places. We've gotten one of our, there's a Superior Hiking Trail guide book that's really good. And you can pick that up there, but you can also grab it on Amazon. And then a number of the like sort of tourist information places up along the North Shore have like maps and guidebooks that you can pick out. And if one of the hikes that you're doing happens to be at one of the state parks, they've always got really good maps. All right. Next up, your camera. So pretty much any camera that will take a picture. You can take great photos with anything that's in good condition. So I have used, these are all three of these are my cameras that I've used. You can use a DSLR, you can use a little point and shoot. That one there happens to be waterproof, so the kids had a really good time playing with that and getting pictures of fish underwater. Smartphones, you can use like an iPad or Chromebook or something, but they're really awkward. So I don't recommend those as much, but they are possible if that's the only thing that you've got. Treat your camera gently to help it last a long time. Take special care of your lenses. So I suggest using a clean microfiber cloth to clean your lenses and keep them from getting smeared or scratched. Oftentimes, somebody will show me a picture and say, what can I do to fix this? I'm like, clean your lens. You're getting flare, it's blurry. like that. You want to keep your camera dry and safe. A plastic bag actually works just fine. Just pop it in a plastic bag if it starts raining and put that in your backpack. Even waterproof cameras, like the little orange one here, will take blurry photos if there are droplets of water on the lens. And a water droplet basically just acts like dirt. The waterproof camera is meant to be completely submerged. And so it has a flat, like the water just is flat on the lens. But if it's got bubbles of water, it doesn't work so well. And make sure your battery's charged before you go out. So, and taking a spare battery or a solar charger can help if your trip is long. All right. Any questions there? And he says no questions. Okay, great. There we go. So I wanted to talk about how to actually make a good photo. Composition, you want to talk about, we want to talk about focal point. You want to choose what it is that's important about your photo. What do you want people to look at or pay attention to? What's the most important thing? And then you want to compose the rest of your photo around that focal point, drawing attention to it. So in the photo with the kiddo in the red sweater, he's what I really want you to look at. And so one of the things that I did in this picture was I made sure that there wasn't anything distracting around him. So really just surrounded by the gravel. And yet I also wanted to show that he was in this really beautiful place along the North Shore. So that's also included in the picture. But you really look at him first, and then your eye goes to the rest of the picture. And the other one, the orange rock is really the most important. The other ones are interesting too, but I wanted to make sure that the orange rock was kind of by itself, ready to jump out at you. All right. And then a few examples of focal point. In the reflection picture, in fact, it's not so much the two kids standing as it is their reflection. That's the main focal point. And you can see them, but they're really kind of obscured by the cliff that's behind them. Where you can really see them is in the reflection because they've just got the sky around them. So they stand out a little more in the reflection, even though it's not as sharp. Front and center for the little clover in the middle with a little bit of dewdrops. And, the rock, the red rock that just happened to be sitting there. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too distracting. I could have gotten in closer, but I wanted to really show what was around it there. So, all right. Annie, go ahead and just jump in anytime that we've got questions.
Yeah, I think I'm just curious to know, like, is there do you have any tips for playing around with different focal points or depths?
It some of that really depends on what camera you've got. Some of them really lend themselves to being able to control that. And some of them don't. But if you get right in close to something, it doesn't matter which camera that you've got, as long as you're able to get you're able to still be able to focus on it. A lot of times the background can go out of focus, like you'll see here. And some of the newer phones, like I just recently got the newest iPhone because I wanted to see what I could do with that. It actually allows you to play with the focal point. It lets you choose one and then put other things out of focus, which is kind of crazy to me, but interesting. Most of the time though, unless you have a DSLR, your camera is going to try to get as much stuff in focus as possible. Okay, so now I wanted to talk about foreground, middle ground, and background. This isn't as important in like up close pictures, obviously. But if you're doing a landscape, it's especially good to have something interesting in the foreground, in the middle ground, and in the background of a picture. You want to choose your focal point, and sometimes it's going to be in the front, and sometimes it's not. Um, but if you've got something to look at all the way back, it gives your photo more depth and lots to look at. So, like say with the trail and the ferns, right? You've got the trail right in the very front. You've got ferns kind of in the middle. You've got some trees also kind of middle, but middle back, and then all the way, the trail like just goes off into the distance. So it gives you lots to look at all the way through. So some examples here on the bridge. The bridge itself is right up front. Um, the boy in the sweater is in the middle, and then the trees are in the background. And with the other bridge, it's there's not as much background because it really is just the little trees sticking up way in the back with the fog, but they still do add interest and give you some more depth. All right. Now I want to talk about using the rule of thirds, which is something that a lot of photographers do. Um, you can put stuff right smack dab in the center of the picture, but if you've got a lot of different stuff going on, it can be more interesting to use the rule of thirds instead of centering a subject. And your camera probably has a grid that you can actually turn on that will show you just exactly that, like what you're seeing here. It'll divide your screen so that you can see where your thirds are, and then you can use that to help compose your photo. So try putting a subject on either one of the crossings or the lines. So here I've got, the trees are pretty close to this up and down line. And then the trailblaze is right near the crossing between these two lines here. And it doesn't have to be exact, right? Pretty close is good enough. And I have some examples on that. Were there any questions on this one? All right. Well, I will just go right into examples here and then the next one. So, in both of these, I've got the person on the thirds, the left third on one, the right third on the other one. And in fact, I've also got the tree here going on the other third there. And then I've got the rock right near where the crossing of the lines is. And I just think it makes a much more interesting picture.
We have a question from Lisa about the rule
Okay,
of
great.
thirds.
Mhm.
Is there a certain time when you use the rule of thirds?
You know, I often try it to see, right? So one of the things that I really like to do when I'm taking a picture is I'll take one and then I'll think, well, what if I do this instead? Right? So sometimes I'll just, immediately put something on a thirds line. And sometimes, I won't, and then I'll think, well, what if it does? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I tend to use it especially in landscapes because I think that it makes landscapes really, really much more interesting than just having something like straight down the center. Um, the like the path that I had. Let me go back to the path here. If that had just been the very center, I don't think that I would have found it as interesting a photo for me. And then it also, if you're looking at it as well, this other tree, which is on the other side, is actually pretty interesting too. And that's on the other third side. Um, but honestly, it's like using your own eye. What do you think is going to look good for you? Because what you like may be different from what somebody else likes. So using your own judgment is definitely something that I recommend on that. And if that wasn't clear enough, let me know, and I will see if I can go for more. All right, so exposure and color. You want to make sure your subject stands out from the background, either by having a contrasting color, a contrasting texture, or a contrasting brightness. Usually the brighter is going to be better than having your subject be darker, but not always. And you want to take photos sometimes at different exposures to see which one looks best. And different cameras use different techniques for this. If you're just using a phone, you can usually do a slide up and down on the screen that will let you do that. Some cameras will let you aim your camera at something and hold actually usually let you hold the focus as well, but hold the focus and the exposure and then move it so you can adjust it that way. So in this one, the mushroom is really what stands out the most because it's surrounded by darker stuff. And the hands are kind of the same brightness, but they're not surrounded by darkness the way that the mushroom is. So just a couple of examples here. The one with the boat, I did take it several different exposures. And when I went brighter than that, I could see more detail on the boat. Depending on your screen, you may be able to see there's a little bit of detail on the boat here. If I got it brighter, I could see a lot more detail on the boat. But I lost the pink in the clouds. And if I went darker, then I lost all the detail in the boat. And the clouds got a little bit more dramatic, but not enough that it made a big difference. A little bit brighter on the stone, which I've put at the rule of thirds, and the same with the moon. The moon's in the thirds. And it really, that's the thing that is the brightest. There's the most contrast between the dark background and the bright moon. And so your eye obviously goes right there. Okay. So then a few tips and tricks that I found that help make your photos more interesting. I want to talk about photographing textures, about some color composition, and about changing your perspective. There's lots and lots of really interesting colors and textures and ways to change your perspective on the Superior Trail. It's something that I really love just going and doing every year. I always come across something new. I think that the one that really encapsulates all of these the best, actually both of these do really, but the one that I like the most about the changing your perspective as well is the one with the steps in it, where we've got all kinds of textures, right? We've got the texture of the different stones, we've got the grass, we've got the trees, and then nice, clear sky. And the pop in the color between the green and the blue, and then being way down low. And one of the things that I loved about this is that up at the top of those steps, there's just a parking lot. It's really boring. But getting way down low, I was able to grab this picture that looks like, it's going off, into the hills. So you can get some really interesting things just by changing your perspective around. All right, so for textures, shadows will show the depth and the dimensions of your subject. So you can see here in the picture with the rocks that there's shadows on the right-hand side of each of the rocks, and that really gives them a very round feel. It gives them a lot of depth. If you use a flash, because the flash is coming straight from your camera, it's not going to give you any shadows around the side. So it's going to make your picture a lot flatter. That can be great if you have too much shadow, like you're trying to get people's faces and it's really sunny. But if you're trying to add interest for texture, if you mix up textures and colors, it adds interest and contrast. So you want to look for patterns and lines, and then things that break that pattern. So in this case, the water that's coming in from the side is breaking up the pattern of the rocks. And then texture can tell a story about the scene. So here you can see obviously, the water coming in. That's giving you a sense of, okay, yeah, we're actually on a beach, either a river beach or the lake beach. Or I suppose it could be the ocean, although this is about the Superior Trail, so that's where we are. But it tells you, there's movement here, there's water that's coming and going. Texture can tell you about a tree, about the stillness of the day. It can give a lot of context for things. So, let me go over here. So the one with the stones and then the birch bark, clearly you're somewhere that's near birch trees, even though you're just taking pictures of rocks. And one of the things that I really enjoy is talking about the photo in the middle, because most people, when you talk about texture, you really think about not smooth, like rocks, bark, that kind of thing, where there's a lot of texture. But in fact, really smooth is also a texture. And the really, really smooth water that day tells you what kind of day that was. There was no wind. It was super still. It was actually pretty hot, although you can't necessarily tell that from the photo. But it really gives you a sense of the day, and texture can do that. So, all right. Annie, any questions on here?
Not from the audience, but I had a question about exposure. And kind of if there's any example you like to provide to new students about what that kind of means and how to think about your camera as a tool.
That was actually something that I specifically decided not to go into this because
Oh, sorry.
I don't know what people's equipment is, and I don't know like the ages of who's listening,
Okay.
and what kind of history you have, like how familiar you are with your cameras. But um, if you've got a DSLR, there are settings, and usually a couple of different settings that will let you adjust your exposure manually. But most cameras will let you like set an exposure and then move it. So especially if I'm doing lots of sky or sunsets, that kind of thing, um, I will oftentimes I'll point the camera up towards the sky and lock the exposure onto the sky because that's what I want to get. And then I'll move it back down again to get, trees or whatever else silhouetted. If I were just pointing it toward the trees, the camera would be trying to adjust it to make the trees to be brighter. And then I would lose a lot of the color from the sunset in the sky. So, um, so hopefully that helps. And if you have more questions about that, let me know because I don't have a really good feel for the audience and what would make sense to you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk a little bit about color composition. Um, Using the color wheel when you're thinking about your photos can be really useful. So complementary colors are colors that are opposite to each other on the color wheel. So you can see the picture here just has the arrows, and those are pointing to the opposite colors. So red and green, the violet and the yellow, the blue and the orange. Photos or colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel will really pop out using something really dark and something really light next to each other, right? Except that it's doing it with color. You can even use a couple of different ones on one side and a couple of different ones on the other side. And you can do like a triad of colors, and those are called split complements or complementary colors. And those all make for really interesting photos. And it's like you don't have to make it very complicated. Just it's just something that's fun that I like to think about when I'm doing stuff. And then analogous colors are colors that are right next to each other. And those also can make a really good picture, and they have a different feel to them. So say you're looking at the blue violet, and the violet, right? If you're getting a sunset in there, those are going to be really harmonious and tend to be really peaceful and calming colors. So colors that are opposite to each other are more energetic, and colors that are next to each other tend to be more peaceful. So just something fun to think about. And I had a few examples of that. So the pink and the green are complementary, and they, the flower really jumps out. And I have a little funny story about this, because I was um, showing this photo to some of my students. I actually have a different one that I was going to use, and I didn't notice that I had put this one in accidentally, and my eye just goes so much to the flower. And one of my students said, "Oh yeah, and you got a fly in the corner of your picture." And my brain was so busy looking at the flower next to the green, because it jumps out at you so much, that I completely, oh, I meant to do the other picture that didn't have a fly in the corner. So there you go. That was, I thought about going back and changing the slide out, and then I thought, it's actually kind of fun to be able to say your brain goes so much to looking at the flower that you might not see the fly, even if you kind of know it's there. And then the photo, it's more of a split complementary. So we got sort of reds and oranges, we got blues and greens. So the reds are all on one side, and the blues and greens are on the other side. And then some analogous examples, almost all greens and grays. And then we've got a bunch of grays and oranges, and much more harmonious, like it doesn't jump out at you nearly so much. And lots of texture, as you can see. I'm a big fan of texture. And then I wanted to show you an interesting one that is the same spot. This is Jay Cook, just off the bridge. And I just went back on a different day to try to get the exact same picture, because they looked so different from each other, in such a different mood, even though it's almost exactly the same photo, right? But the colors are just so much more bright, but also you get more of the blues, and there's almost a red here that doesn't show up nearly so much in the other, that gives it a complementary, versus this one, where really what you see is the greens and the yellow greens and the yellows, which is much more analogous. So then I'm on to perspective change. So changing your perspective is really, really interesting. It can make a photo that was kind of meh into something that's really cool. Taking photos from different angles can also show you something new that you might not have noticed before. And one of the things that I really like to do is I like to get really close to stuff, and maybe like underneath. What is underneath that? Or what is around the back of that? And what's around the back side of that tree? What does the underneath side of that mushroom look like? And sometimes they're interesting and sometimes they're not, but I always like to give it a try just to see. So, and then a couple of different examples there. The shoe is fun. Most people don't just do a straight down picture of shoes. But I thought that they were really fun and interesting next to on the red ground. And I didn't want to just get a whole picture of the kiddo wearing the shoes. I just wanted the shoes. And the other one, I tipped the camera, which you can see if you look at the horizon line. And if you're gonna tip, you want to tip a lot so that it looks like you've done it on purpose. But this one, I really wanted to get a picture. This is my mom, and she's a biologist, and she loves looking for animals and plants and all kinds of things. So I'm always getting pictures of her like pointing at things and looking at things. And here she was taking a look at to see if there were, any critters under the rocks. And it, it was not really all that interesting with her just, looking at the rocks. I mean, she's in a blue shirt, which kind of stands out against the rocks. But it wasn't really all that exciting. And I found that when I got up a little higher and shot down a little more and tipped the camera, I could actually get that whole line of green trees and then the blue sky in the background that matched nicely with the blue shirt. But I couldn't get it just by taking a great picture. So I was like, I'll give it a try, move it around a little. So I want to say thank you for coming. Please use some of these tips next time you're on the trail and with the Superior Hiking Trail 50 challenge. So there's, Annie will tell you about it, but there's a photo scavenger hunt that's lots of fun. And then I'm going to be doing a photo field trip in Duluth on the 17th of August. In the morning is going to be a shorter hike for younger kids, and then in the afternoon, a little bit longer for teens. So anyway, thank you again, and I will turn it back over to Anne.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was great. And before I kind of show folks the Hike 50 challenge, which would be a great way to kind of get started on their photography exploration of the trail, I wanted to ask you, are there any, well, firstly, when you're setting out to kind of do a photo hike, as I think of them, like the purpose of the hike is going to be photography. What kind of distance do you like to do, especially with kids along?
Short. Even if it's not with kids along, um, if I'm going for a long hike, I'm I'm going to be hiking. I'm not going to be stopping every 50 feet to take a picture. If I'm doing photos, I'm going to be stopping like and maybe every 5 feet. Like, wait, that's kind of cool. Stop, look at this. And not fast. So if I'm doing photos, I'm puttering around. I'm meandering, you know, and it's so one thing that's really helpful is to know what your purpose of your hike is. So I send my kids on. They go and do big long hikes, and my mom and I will putter around and she'll do biology things and, oh, look, you know, here's a mole. It looks like an owl had been, eating it. She's totally fascinated by that, right? And so she'll stop and look at that and I'll be taking pictures. And so our pace is very different from um, the pace of somebody who's hiking to hike.
And so do the kids then kind of go, do they turn around and come back to you and then you all head back to the car together? Or do you eventually meet them somewhere further up the trail? Or how do you
Um,
handle?
they hike on to the end. They'll usually do a segment, and we'll drive up and meet them at the other side when they're done.
Oh, okay. So you and your mom do your puttering exploration and then head back to where you started while the kids continue on to another endpoint and then you meet there later.
Yep. Yep.
Cool.
And then,
Cool.
and every so often we'll all hike together,
Mhm.
but we just have different interests. And Superior Trail is great for all the interests.
Yeah, agreed. And are there any areas on the trail that you would recommend are a pretty short distance in from a trailhead that you think are really fun to photograph or would be a great first place for folks to go with a camera?
Um, I I always go for the state parks for that. Yeah. Um, pretty much all the state parks up along the North Shore have great segments of the trail that are really pretty. And they're usually near places where you can get maps and they're near bathrooms.
All good. Yeah. All good. I
All in.
also love, I can recommend the Devil's Track River, which is up just outside of Grand Marais, and it's very close to the Pincushion Mountain Trailhead.
Mhm.
And that river gorge, even in comparison to others along that the Superior Hiking Trail, has a really interesting geology to it that's created a different texture when you were talking about the textures, a much different texture in the bedrock than in other places that you'll see. So I think it would be a great example to play around with what you talked about with texture and even the colors, because the color of the rock in that area is very red compared to the greenery around it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, and for our can share some information about the Hike 50 challenge here. I'm going to share my screen and show you guys what we're talking about. So each year, the Superior Hiking Trail, we do what we call a hiking challenge of some kind. So one year we did hiking to all the summits on the trail. Last year we did hiking to learn all about beaver ecology and all of the wonderful ways that beavers help the forest around them. And this year, the Hike 50 challenge has a photography element to it. So what this is anybody who hikes, walks, runs, or putters while photographing 50 miles on the trail in the calendar year gets to earn this patch here. And each year the patch is different. So people like to collect them and just kind of show their hiking accomplishments throughout the years. And as part of that challenge, we have a photo hunt to help folks kind of learn, put into practice what we have learned here today. So to give you a better view of this, so it's just kind of a suggestion of things to go out and photograph. These are all things that will be very easy to find on the trail in pretty much every location. They're all very photographable and easily found locations. There's also, as part of the challenge, we also have a list of suggested places to go hiking. So if you're looking for kind of a place to start at, we feature one suggested hike on each section of the trail. So, if you're looking for someplace close to Duluth, the Spirit Mountain Loop is really great. There's a lot of interesting things along that. But we have a whole list here, kind of progressing north up the trail of places to go. So that can also be found there. Okay, great. Well, I think that we didn't have any other additional questions. Is it okay if is there anything else that you would like to say, Kathy, before I kind of wrap things up for us today?
Um, the 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 one thing that I'm thinking of that doesn't necessarily have to do with photography is that we usually go in August because there are a lot fewer mosquitoes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this morning. And if you I would like to give a special thanks to anybody who joined as a member or donated at registration. If you haven't done that yet and you'd like to, you can go to superiorhiking.org/join. Members power the work of taking care of the trail and keeping SHT beautiful for you to photograph. It also helps us provide classes like this. And you can also stay up to date on the latest trail news and follow us online with our Trail Mix e-newsletter. And that's also, you can find other guided hikes that we're hosting if you want to go along on those or other trail events going on. So thank you all again so much for coming. Have a good day, everybody.